You see, the Great Pyramid is not just this gigantic structure sitting out in the middle of this desert. It's actually a beacon of information that was sent from the past. It's a time capsule. The speed of light in a vacuum in meters per second perfectly match the actual location of the Grand Gallery. Now, let me ask you a question. How did they know the distance to the sun? You would have had to actually known the distance from the Earth to the sun prior to building the structure. In my opinion, this Great Pyramid wasn't built 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15,000 years ago. In my opinion, it was built between 36,000 to 45,000 years ago. The dimensions of this box perfectly match the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. The Great Pyramid has the calculations built in it to calculate how fast we are moving along that arm as we orbit the black hole itself. So the Great Pyramid is encoded with advanced knowledge. This pyramid, the Great Pyramid at Giza, is just one of many on the planet, obviously. This one in particular, because we've been able to access it, we've been able to analyze it, we've been able to scan it. We've done CAT scans, muon scans, ground penetrating radar scans. We've been inside of it. We've been on top of it. We've looked at this thing from every angle. So we've got a lot of data, is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of data on the Great Pyramid, which is why I decided to really go after the information and see how much data I can extract from this structure and what would it mean. And kind of just trying to figure out, like, what is this pyramid? Because the more I analyzed it, the more I realized it was most likely a multifunctional stone computer and a device that potentially generated wireless electricity. We look at Thoth. I always go to the ancients because they're the ones that are leaving these cookie crumbs for us. And so Thoth the Atlantean, in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he says, "Builded I the Great Pyramid, patterned after the pyramid of Earth's force, burning eternally so that it too might remain through the ages. In it I builded my knowledge of magic science." Magic science translates into modern terms into advanced technology. So that it might be here when I again return from Amenti. While I sleep in the halls of Amenti, which they found underneath the Great Pyramid, they found all of these hundreds of arched hallways underneath the Great Pyramid, extending out 1 mile underneath the Giza Plateau, just about 3 years ago. My soul roaming free will incarnate, dwell amongst men in this form or another. So he's talking about the fact that he has the capability of transferring his consciousness into other avatar bodies to walk amongst men, but unlike a man. So these beings were so technologically advanced, they can walk among us, looking like us, made from a cloned avatar body, and you'd never know that they'd be standing directly next to you. So here I am at the Great Pyramid at Giza, and I'm inside of the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, analyzing this stone box. This stone box, which they are mainstream is trying to say is a sarcophagus, in my personal opinion, it just can't be a sarcophagus. I've seen sarcophagi. I've been to the valley of the pharaohs, and I've gone inside of tombs, and I've seen all of the sarcophagus in there and looked at them, analyzed them, touched them, and they're massive, super massive. It's really a mystery how they got those things down there, Valley of the Kings. But inside of here, you can see, I'm 6'4". I'm about 205 pounds, to give you an idea of my height and my weight, standing next to this stone box that's inside the Great Pyramid. And so you get an idea that even with me laying flat on my back inside this box, my knees would be slightly bent, just a little slight bent. I couldn't really fully extend my legs all the way out. Matter of fact, I have a couch in my house that's 90 inches, which is just enough for me to get my feet. I can lay on that. The only couch I can lay on that's, I can lay and extend my legs all the way out. I can't do it in this box. So my couch is longer than this box in terms of my ability to stretch out. Give you an idea of the size of this box. Now, with that being said, knowing that, the sarcophagi usually weigh, 2, 3 tons or more. And now I'm standing next to a box of stone, which is hollow in the middle and, could weigh maybe just a few hundred pounds, maybe 1,000 at the most. it doesn't make any sense that it would be a burial place. There's nothing there to say that this is a burial place. Now, what's really interesting about this, the dimensions of this box, the actual dimensions perfectly match the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. In other words, if you were to take a measuring tape and measure the inside lining of that box, you can actually fit the Ark of the Covenant right inside. And so I started really looking into that and wondering, hypothesizing, could this be where the Ark of the Covenant, or at least one of them, because there were multiple Arks of the Covenant, if you didn't know. Could it be that they left the Ark of the Covenant in this box? I've also been really looking into the fact that Akhenaten may have been the Moses of the Bible. And the reason why he was being ousted from Egypt was not purely because of the way a lot of the biblical stories have gone. I think it was because he was ushering in monotheism into Egypt. He was bringing in the one God system, the one God mindset, and he was getting all that information directly from Amen-Ra, also known as Aten, the sun disk. And Amen-Ra had him going around defacing all the faces of the gods and the Neturu and all the glyphs all around Egypt and any other area they ruled, tearing the faces and the ears and the faces and the noses off the statues as far and wide as they can find them and tear them apart, because he said there will be no other God but me. That was the sun god. And so Akhenaten was doing this, and eventually the Egyptians got a little ticked off and they were like, you know what? This guy's erasing all of our history. We got to get rid of him. And I really do believe that he orchestrated a theft of the Ark of the Covenant from this box that I'm standing next to inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, because it was a source of power. And he took that along with his followers of the new monotheistic religion out into the desert with him. And this is most likely why the pharaoh chased him, because he took the source of the pyramid's power. I think that the Great Pyramid was generating power without the Ark many millennia prior. But because the actual pyramid itself, in some weird way and some mechanism had broken, the Ark of the Covenant fulfilled that last piece of the power generating source to send that beam up through the apex, which then would be carried wirelessly by the obelisk. But I think that's what happened. And of course, another thing that they don't really tell you is that the Red Sea is not the sea that was crossed. It was the Sea of Reeds. That's a mistranslation in the modern day Bible, which is a much smaller, much easier sea to cross. But I really do believe that's what that box is for, which is why I really want to show it. Now, another thing about this box, it's in the king's chamber, which is right above the grand gallery. So to get to this king's chamber, you have to kind of, well, I have to really stoop low and kind of crawl up this, probably like a 60-degree angle gallery to get up into the king's chamber. If you're not in good shape, it could be a little bit of work to get up there. But what's interesting is the location of the actual, the degrees of the actual grand gallery itself leading up is 29.9792458 degrees north. Now, what's interesting is the speed of light in meters per second is 299,792,458 meters per second. So you see the numbers match. So the speed of light in a vacuum in meters per second perfectly match the the actual location of the grand gallery. Now that's pretty interesting. And you're saying, people say, well, no, it can't be. It's just a coincidence because meters, the metric system didn't exist. Not actually. So we know this is the speed of light in the vacuum, right? And this is the grand gallery I'm looking at right here on the right-hand side. Give you a kind of a bird's eye view of what it looks like to get up into the king's chamber and get back down to the level that can even take you further down into the queen's chamber, which is below, okay? But let's analyze this. Well, I discovered that the proto-cuneiform tablets and mathematics system that was discovered, believe it or not, in Mesoamerica, of all places. What are Sumerian proto-cuneiform writings doing found in Mesoamerica? But they found them. And guess what? They actually depict a proto-metric system, which would date back 8,000 to 10,000 years. So we're talking about a proto-cuneiform mathematical system that's also proto-metric. So the metric system definitely was not just something that we recently discovered or created. That's actually just a rediscovery of something that already existed. We always come back to the same old story. A lot of the stuff that we are learning now and inventing today, we're just rediscovering things that already existed. We may have a different twist on it or a different take on it. We may tweak it here or tweak it there, but overall, in my personal opinion, after now researching these topics and going through over 1,000 cylinder scrolls, scriptures, cuneiform tablets, papyruses, you name it, books, to me, as far as I can see now, the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, all these ancient texts, the Code of Hammurabi, we're talking about a very sophisticated ancient culture that visited this planet and really endowed mankind with a lot of the things that we are just now rediscovering. So if anybody ever says, if you ever tell anybody, can you believe that the speed of light is the same degrees as the Grand Gallery and the Great Pyramid, and they go, no, the metric system didn't exist. Well, actually, no. Now you have the power and the knowledge to tell them, actually it did. The metric system existed long time ago. So one of the most amazing anomalies is right here on Earth, the embedded constants in the Great Pyramid. This is what I want to share with you guys today, okay? The tropical year or the calendar year can actually be calculated from the structure itself. So you take the length of a base side, which is 9,131 pyramid inches, measured at the mean socket level, or 365.24 pyramid cubits, which is the number of the days in the year, okay? They really encoded everything about our cycles, our days, our months, our years, directly into the actual building of the structure itself. The perimeter of the base divided by 100 equals 365.24. The number of days in a year. It's really incredible for them to have that advanced foreknowledge to construct something that had to be built at speed, that had to be built with these megalithic blocks, and at the same time still, the agenda initially going in. This takes foreplanning. You have to plan to do these kind of things. You can't go, while we started building, let's add the days of the year to this structure. So before the structure was even started on construction, before the first hole was dug, before the first brick was created or quarried, all the things that they wanted to endow into the structure were pre-thought. And then from there, the master architect had to find a way to take all this data and put it all into the structure in terms of the architectural plans before it was actually built. That's incredible. Now, the tropical year can be calculated. The length of the antechamber used as a diameter of a circle produces a circumference of 365.242, accurate to within 6 digits of the tropical year. The tropical year can also be calculated by the ratio of the length of the Grand Gallery to the solid diagonal of the King's Chamber times 100 equals the number of days in a tropical year. Accurate to within 8 digits again. And the sidereal year, the length of the antechamber of the King's Chamber times pi equals the length of the sidereal year. Accurate again to within only 8 digits. This takes really advanced foreknowledge. It takes at first, because the reason why is because you need to know these statistics. You need to know the calculations of these years and these months and that you want to put into the structure. So you have to have the foreknowledge of that. And then you have to say, okay, now let's make this list of all the things we want to add into the structure. We want to encode the structure with this information for somebody to discover it. Because there's no other real reason to put it there other than for it to be a beacon for us right now in this current era. You can also calculate the mean distance to the sun by taking half of the length of the diagonal of the base times 10 to the 6th power equals the average distance to the sun. Now, let me ask you a question, okay? How did they know the distance to the sun? That would be 1 AU, 1 astronomical unit. The distance from the Earth to the sun is 1 AU in astrophysics. How did they know this? How in the world did they get this information? I mean, I can calculate the circumference of the Earth or the curvature of the Earth with 2 sticks. That's pretty easy to do. I can take a stick and put it in the ground here, 3-foot stick here. I can have my friend go 3 miles away, put a stick in the ground at the same time of day, and I can call my friend and say, hey, measure the angle of the shadow, and I'm going to measure the angle of my shadow right now, and I could take the angle of those shadows, and I can calculate the actual spherical the size of the Earth to within maybe just a few inches or so. Okay, not too hard to do, but you can't just look at the sun and go, oh, it's going to be X amount of distance away from the Earth. You have to have advanced knowledge. You would have had to actually known the distance from the Earth to the sun prior to building the structure. And how did they get that information? That's the big question mark. The mean distance to the sun, the height of the pyramid times 10 to the 9th power represents the mean radius of the Earth's orbit around the sun, or astronomical unit, AU. So we can also calculate the actual orbit of the Earth around the sun via the Great Pyramid measurements. The mean distance to the moon can be calculated. The length of the Jubilee passage times 7 to the 10th to the 7th is the mean distance to the moon. And again, that's calculating a distance of 238,865 miles. Something you can't just do with the naked eye. This means you had a sophisticated piece of technology that was able to measure the distance from the Earth to the moon, or maybe if you came in from the outside, from the moon to the Earth, but you would actually need to know this information, which means you would need technology to know this information, or somebody would need to bring this knowledge to you from somewhere else, somebody who had the technology or had the means to actually do it. You can calculate the sun's radius from the Great Pyramid. Twice the perimeter of the bottom of the granite coffer times 10 to the 8th is the sun's mean radius. Okay, so that's incredible. 10 to the 8th equals 427,316 miles. So we know that the radius of the sun is 427,316 miles. And how do we know that? Because it's encoded into the Great Pyramid. But how do we know it before the pyramid? Because we have technology. We have satellites in space. We have the capability of scanning taking a look at the sun, scanning it with our digital equipment, and then having a computer. We have the luxury of having a computer calculate the radius. But how did they do that in ancient times? How in the world did they do it? Now, in my opinion, this Great Pyramid wasn't built 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15,000 years ago. In my opinion, it was built between 36,000 to 45,000 years ago. Two processional periods back. 2 full processional periods is about the time that I personally estimate, my personal estimation, that the Great Pyramid was built. And if I'm right, we're talking about pre-dynastic era. We're talking about the land of Kem, long before this structure resided in a place now called Egypt. Back then it was called the land of Kem, which is where you get the word chemistry and alchemy from. All right. You can also calculate Earth's polar radius. That's calculating the radius going this way from top to the bottom, the polar radius. Something we couldn't do really until not too long ago, actually. But the sacred cubit times 10 to the 7 equals the polar radius of the Earth, which is the distance from the North Pole to Earth's center. 25 pyramid inches times 10 to the 7. We're talking about 3,950 miles we're calculating, and we're talking about doing that all based off of the sacred cubit. Again, a really advanced foreknowledge has to be established to be able to do these calculations. In Earth's polar radius, the pyramid embodies a scale ratio of 1 to 43,200 of the Earth's size. So the pyramid itself is actually a scaled down version of the planet Earth. If you were to draw a sphere around the actual pyramid, you have a scale of 1 by 43,200 of the actual Earth size. Again, incredible. So again, you have to know the exact size of the Earth, and then you have to make your scale 1 by 43,000. I mean, that's just incredible. Incredible mathematics, incredible knowledge, which is a distance of 3,938.68 miles, which is the polar radius of the Earth to within 11 miles. So these are some amazing mathematical calculations that I was able to discover in the Great Pyramid. There's just a list of other constants. I would be on here literally. There just wasn't enough time today to go into everything I really wanted to dig into, because that would be like a 4 or 5 hour presentation, but I'm going to go over a little bit more. The Great Pyramid of Giza is highly intelligently designed and clearly demonstrates that the builders possess highly advanced geodetic, astronomical, and astrophysical knowledge, well beyond what has been taught in advanced mathematics, including Newtonian mathematics. And the following is a list of conclusions drawn from the analysis of the relationship of dimensions found within the Great Pyramid. A precise definition of the royal cubit as it relates to the Earth, the size and shape of the Earth, the mass and density of the Earth, the gravitational constant, the escape velocity from Earth to obtain an open orbit can be calculated from the Great Pyramid. This is one thing, I'm gonna stop right here for 1 second. A lot of people don't understand what the Freemasonry is all about. They got all these weird ideas about the true purpose, the final agenda, the top agenda of Freemasonry is space travel. Why? Because you have to travel 33 times the speed of sound to break Earth's orbit. To leave out into space requires that speed velocity. And that's why the only runway for launching a rocket for NASA, for example, in Florida is pad 33. But the true secret behind Freemasonry is all about space travel. It's about obtaining or reobtaining what they believe is their birthright, the ability to access space. And so 33 is the number chosen because that's the required speed you need, 33 times the speed of sound to break Earth's gravity. That's what it's really all about. The escape velocity from Earth to obtain escape from the combined Earth and Sun's gravitational field, the significance of the location of the Great Pyramid, the golden ratio and the mass of the Sun, the mass of the Moon can be calculated, the mean distance to the Sun and the circumference of Earth's orbit, the neutral points of gravity between the Earth and the Sun, where NASA has now discovered X points exist. So NASA discovered between those points, there's something called X points, and these X points are actually portals that open up and close from time to time on a daily basis and open up direct openings that will take you from the Earth to the Moon or from the Earth even directly to the Sun. In portals, they discovered the portals there, it's incredible. The mean distance to the Moon, the orbital velocity of the Earth, and we can calculate how the speed of the Earth orbiting around the actual Sun, the orbital velocity of the Moon, the metatonic 19-year cycle of the Moon's orbit of the Earth, the Lagrange point between the Earth and the Moon. We can also calculate the speed of light through the Great Pyramid, the orbital velocity of the solar system, and relative to the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So our solar system is moving on that arm in the outer reaches of the Milky Way, and that arm is actually orbiting the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And the Great Pyramid has the calculations built in it to calculate how fast we are moving along that arm as we orbit the black hole itself. Okay, let that marinate for a minute. The velocity of the local group of galaxies, which include the Milky Way galaxy, relative to the universe. So we know the speed that all galaxies are expanding and moving away and colliding into each other based off the calculations all encoded into the Great Pyramid. So you see, the Great Pyramid is not just this gigantic structure sitting out in the middle of this desert. It's actually a beacon of information that was sent from the past. It's a time capsule that was put there to function as it needed to do in real time at that era. But in this time, it's now a time capsule for us. It is a structure that is encoded with so much information, wisdom, and knowledge. And this day, today, we are the children under this current sun that have been blessed to be able to decipher this knowledge, this wisdom, this information, and find out how we can actually apply it to our current everyday lives. And from what I take from what I've seen so far with the Great Pyramid and this wisdom and knowledge that have been left behind, it's given me a clue as to where humanity is going and will go. It's a little bit of foreshadowing into a future that we all have, a future which really is our birthright. Our birthright is to basically travel the stars, to gain back what was taken away, or what we fell from and lost. Is to become a spacefaring race once again, and to be able to reach out to the stars, and to be able to see ourselves and our fellow humans in a totally different way. That there is no separation. That separation is actually an illusion. That we all literally are one. So it's really amazing. The Great Pyramid is encoded with this distance to the sun. I was going over this earlier, but here's one thing I want to show you guys. The solar equatorial parallax is 8.9008091 seconds of arc, okay? Now, using 91,848,817 miles as the mean distance to the sun and 3,963.4914 miles as the equatorial radius, the distance between the mean socket level and the height of the leveled bedrock is 8.9008. And the parallax is 8.9008091. This is no mistake. This is absolutely no mistake. You know, you can actually calculate, you know, the base of the pyramid calculates the solar equatorial parallax. That's incredible. This is incredible science and astrophysics encoded into the Great Pyramid, which is why I decided to talk about this today. Also, that these glyphs also exist all over Egypt and many other places, and they were never touched as well. So it wasn't this accidental etching that created these images. These things that appear to be what we would call advanced technology existed in the ancient past, or either the person that did this work had foreknowledge of this technology, or was given a vision or saw it. In some way, shape, or form, they were trying to represent something that either existed or something that they knew would exist. I can't say exactly what it would be because obviously I was not there, but the homegrown guides will tell you that these glyphs, nobody's ever gone up, nobody's ever edited these things. They are the same. They are exactly what you see, what was there thousands of years ago. And like I said, they proceeded to show me many of these similar glyphs all around Egypt. I spent some time there, quite a bit of time, going to every single temple, every ancient site, every pyramid that I can get access to. Some you couldn't get access to. I spent time with pyramid priests. I spent time meditating in the Holy of Holies. I did a lot of things that a lot of people would never get a chance to do. Fortunately for me, I was blessed to be able to do that in Egypt. And I'm gonna wrap up with this mind bender before we go. Cairo, by the way, Cairo is also, it represents this place called Cydonia. Okay, so Cairo represents Cydonia, and on Mars is a place called Cydonia on Mars. And so it's really interesting that the ancient name for Cairo is Cydonia, and that it really means Mars. It's a location on Mars, a specific location. And why would I show you this Avebury, UK ordnance map? What you're looking at now on your screen is an ordnance map of Avebury in the UK. And the reason why I'm showing this to you is because there's a place on Mars called Cydonia, which perfectly aligns with this Avebury, UK ordnance map, modern ordnance map. In other words, the anomalies or the mounds that are built there artificially on Avebury in the UK, very, very long time ago, hundreds of years ago, perfectly match these structures that were discovered at Cydonia on Mars. Okay, and when you merge the two together, when you take Cydonia and overlay it as a transparency over, or take the ordnance map, as a transparency and overlay it over Cydonia, all the major anomalies perfectly align with the artificial anomalies here on Earth. How could that be? How hundreds of years ago could people in Avebury know to build these mounds and move literally millions of tons of dirt to create these artificial mounds and these walkways and these pathways that perfectly match that of the ones that were discovered on Cydonia in the NASA image? What kind of initially drew you to say, you know what, something about this pyramid, I just want to begin to research it? What drew you to use your engineering prowess on breaking down this pyramid? Well,
the Great Pyramid, as you know, is probably the most talked about, the most studied. Have been more books written about the Great Pyramid than any other single pyramid in the world. And so all the focus seemed to be on the Great Pyramid. And because of the attention that it has received by ancient researchers and explorers, there's more data available to analyze. And, the dimensions, measurements, and the condition of the interior chambers have been discussed and noted and marveled at for decades, 100 years, since Petrie was researching in Egypt. But for me, the one book that actually resonated with me was a book by Peter Tompkins called Secrets of the Great Pyramid. And in Secrets of the Great Pyramid, Peter Tompkins introduced a variety of different explorers, commentators, those who had studied the Great Pyramid and who had actually questioned its origins and what it currently is seen to be in the eyes of academia, which is the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu. Yeah. And so in that book, there seemed to be a huge question mark associated with the Great Pyramid. And Tompkins himself, punctuated that with his own question, could the Great Pyramid embody a high science from our ancient past? And it was a question mark that resonated with me. And because of the detail that he presented in his book with respect to the schematics of the Great Pyramid, the interior arrangement, the chambers, the shafts, the passageways, and how unusual they all were, and each feature raising a question in people's mind: why? You could look at a meme of the Great Pyramid and its interior chambers and just paste question marks all over it, right? It would be like you'd be just flooded with question marks. That's basically what kind of set me off. And it was during the reading of that book that I pondered on what the original purpose was. And it occurred to me that, and this was kind of like a study from a ROI perspective, a return on investment, to recognize that the culture that built the Great Pyramid were significantly advanced in their manufacturing methods and building methods. And what they had built was representative of the state of the art of their industry at that time. But the Great Pyramid and other pyramids too seem to be the only remnants of this lost civilization that was employing advanced mathematical and engineering tools and science in their building. So as I was pondering that question and the expense, just the sheer expense of building the Great Pyramid, I got a quote from an estimator in the UK who estimates conventional power plants, and he said it would be $25 billion to build the Great Pyramid. I think that's a conservative estimate myself. I think there are right now too many unknowns with respect to how, what remains to be found, because they're finding stuff all the time, right? These new explorations are focused on muography, and then there's the explorations of the shafts that run to the Queen's Chamber shaft, and the King's Chamber shafts. So all of this activity and all of this new information that is coming out and has come out over the years was incorporated into Giza, the Tesla connection. To my mind, it was like, well, to spend that much money and invest that much resources into a structure, they had to have been getting something fairly significant out of it. And what better return on investment than actually energy? So That's why I named the Giza power plant the Giza power plant, my first book. I hadn't even figured out how the bloody thing works, so I had that to go through, and it was a process of reverse engineering, and it wasn't. I mean, I just didn't rely on myself. I had notions, I had ideas about what this feature may have been doing, or what this feature may have been doing, but it was kind of like bouncing those ideas off of fellow engineers, specialists. There was a string of specialists that I consulted over the years. There were civil engineers, construction engineers, electrical engineers, physicists, you name it. So, it was chemical engineers. And so it's kind of like, when I finally put the Giza power plant together and got it published, it wouldn't have happened just based on what knowledge I contained at the time I started the project.
Right. I had come up with a hypothesis a long time ago that the shafts that were aligned with star systems could have been used, possibly, just a hypothesis, communication. But I said, what would they use to communicate? So I hypothesized hydrogen frequency, because I know that's what we use right now in modern astrophysics. And I saw in your book that you had come up with a theory about hydrogen generation or extraction of hydrogen atoms from water. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and this is where when doing that reverse engineering or study of the Great Pyramid, the whole pyramid, I treated the entire pyramid as one complete system. And so if it worked as a machine, and it certainly looks like a machine when you look at the cross section of it, and it has the precision of a machine, only on the scale of acres. So it's kind of that's a significant point when you say, hey, this is a machine. How does the machine operate? And every part of the machine plays its part, and everything is related. So with respect to hydrogen, the one key bit of evidence in the Great Pyramid is in the King's Chamber, and that is the northern shaft. So the northern shaft, it has a width of 8.4 inches and a height of 4.8 inches. And the wavelength of hydrogen is 8.309 inches. And the suitable waveguide for hydrogen maser would be a wavelength wide and approximately half a wavelength high. There are questions with respect to, well, were the shafts shielded? And, those materials do not currently exist in the pyramid.
Right.
So it's hard to say what else may have been in there and allowed this machine to function. But the hydrogen aspect of it also, you move down to the Queen's Chamber, because if you're saying, okay, they were using hydrogen and pumping the hydrogen to a higher energy level, which in microwave amplification through stimulated emission radiation, which is amaze, which is the laser was first called an optical maser because the laser is light, and this is microwaves.
Right.
But so in order to have a medium, which is hydrogen, then you would have to generate it somewhere and deliver it to the King's Chamber. And that's where we look at the beneath, lower down in the structure, we look at the Queen's Chamber and the shafts that come into the Queen's Chamber. Now, those are very interesting. I mean, they're still a subject of debate, and people have different ideas about them. But I have stayed fairly consistent with my analysis of them in that they were used to deliver two chemicals to the chamber which combined boiled off hydrogen.
Yeah.
The evidence that I point to support that is that the shafts were not connected to the chamber itself. When the pyramid was constructed and they built the Queen's Chamber, those shafts were terminated about 5 inches away from the inside wall of the chamber on both sides. And there's 2 shafts, and they both have different characteristics. When I wrote the Giza power plant, I was aware of several of the characteristics which supported the theory that they were delivering a fluid into the chamber, and that those fluids, different kinds, mixed and created hydrogen. Since then, there's been other evidence that has come up, and it's very significant for the Giza power plant theory, and that is the question was left open in the book, how did they get the chemicals into the shaft?
Right.
And in the Giza power plant, I proposed that they was pumped to the back of Gantenbrink's door. Rudolf Gantenbrink was a German robotics engineer. In 1993, he was contracted to clean the shafts of the King's Chamber to improve ventilation. And while he was there, he made a proposal to actually explore the Queen's Chamber shafts because nobody knew where the exits were to these shafts, right? And so he put in a proposal to clean those shafts. He got permission, built his robot, and started to explore the shafts.
Yeah.
So that was in 1993, and he sent his robot up the southern shaft, and the robot came against a blockage. It was like a limestone block, was barring further progress up the shaft. And there were 2 metal pins that were sticking out of this block, and they were bent down to the face of the block. The pins were tapered as though they had been eroded. One had actually broken off. But anyway, the door was essentially called Gantenbrink's door. And so the big question mark then became, what lies behind Gantenbrink's door? Well, of course, who doesn't want to know that? This happened in 2002. They did an exploration. Yeah, they made a pyramid rover, a robot that went up the shaft and drilled a hole through the door. Then they inserted an endoscopic camera, and it basically flooded a space at the back of it with light, and there was nothing there but another, what 𝗪𝗓𝗧 called another door, and a space about the size of a bread box. But it was interesting anyway. I mean, it was progress. The ideas that were floated by the different Egyptologists and specialists, who were interviewed, were interesting. All the Egyptologists seemed to be united in their belief that there was something magical going on, and that the pharaoh, the king's soul needed to go up those shafts to exit the pyramid. Well, it's quite amusing when you look at it, because there was the narrator for National Geographic's kept asking, these awkward questions, and she was saying, well, what about the blockage? And then one of the Egyptologists, I think it was Mark Lehner, said, well, the king's soul would have no problem passing through that limestone block. They call it a dummy door or a false door.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, magic. And then there was another Egyptologist, Rainer Stadelman, he talked about the existence of the metal pins. And he said that, well, they were magical instruments that the soul used to raise the door so he could pass through it.
Yeah.
Well, they're united in the idea that the king was exiting the pyramid through those shafts. He could probably leave the pyramid 4 times a week if he was on a diet.
Right. And, it's laughable. I mean, it's just laughable. I mean,
it depends which direction he wants to go, north or south, right?
I mean, you're making a lot of great points, and I'm so glad that you're speaking. I'm allowing you to speak your mind, because people hear from me a lot, and I keep describing the Great Pyramid for the last, 15 years as a machine.
Yeah.
It's a gigantic stone machine, and also I believe it's also a gigantic stone computer. Right. And with a lot of things encoded into it, and really like a time capsule for people like you and I in this current time to decode it, and for us to tell the people what happened back then and how high society existed and the technology that they had that we don't have yet. But when people hear me saying it, I mean, sometimes it's like a parent and a child, and eventually the child will hear the parent saying something, but when they hear it from the neighbor's parent or a friend, all of a sudden they really believe it, but of course you come with a lot of credibility. Your accolades and credibility in engineering as a real engineer far supersede anything that I know in engineering. I just come up with hypotheses. Now your hypotheses are also, there, but they're based on your life experience and your study and your research in the field of research that you've chosen, for your own career, which makes it that much more, in my opinion, credible. And I think, and one of the things you had brought up earlier, the ROI, the return on investment, the reason why I do believe this is a gigantic stone machine is because you cannot say to your civilization, hey, we're going to move over 2 million blocks of stone and build this impossible structure and hope that it pans out, hope that it works.
And your taxes are going to go up.
Right. I mean, you have to have foreknowledge. This is something that's built with complete foreknowledge, with complete blueprints. There is no room for error. There's no room for mistakes. This thing is so precise. The entire thing must be blueprinted and figured out beforehand, and with foreknowledge, knowing that exactly what it was built for would actually happen. So you're talking about a real ROI, not the hypothetical. This is real. You don't move that kind of mass and build something that sophisticated just for happenstance and say, hey, let's see if this works out, guys. Let's see if, let's see if this pans out for us. No, you don't waste those kind of resources, especially in that time period.
They knew what they were doing, exactly what they were doing, and they knew exactly what the outcome was going to be before they even started. So, I mean, of that I am convinced.
Absolutely. Just incredible. I mean, your knowledge is mind-boggling.
The Giza-Tesla connection came after there had been such an accumulation of new information that seemed super relevant in terms of how we may look at the future and what our energy mix is going to be, our energy generation mix is going to be, and how we can reduce some of the less efficient methods and move to more efficient methods of producing energy. Yeah. And all of the, everything came together really after 2018. I did a couple of tours with Mohammed, your good friend, my good friend, Mohammed, in 2018, 2019. They were highly successful. And the outcome of that was that one of my research associates, Robert 𝗪𝗪𝗧, who actually passed away last year, sadly, he made contact with a NASA physicist. And this NASA physicist was doing research on earthquake lights. And the way he described the physics behind earthquake lights it kind of resonated with me, and I was like, well, that's it. It's not just seismic energy in terms of mechanical vibrations that drives the pyramid. It's also the flood of electrons that are flowing from the lithosphere through the pyramid and being channeled in probably various ways. In the Great Pyramid, it would add to the creation of the 𝗪𝗧𝗧, and as far as when you think of the Tesla connection, you look at the 𝗪𝗘𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗧 Tower that he was hoping to build and had started to develop before his funding was pulled. But the wireless transmission of energy seemed to be the objective for Tesla. And the guy was a genius anyway, so all his other stuff seemed to do extremely well. I can't imagine that he would have failed if he'd have had enough money to move forward with the 𝗪𝗘𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗧 Tower. In the Giza, the Tesla connection, first of all, I identify the Tesla connection as being the wireless distribution of energy. That's one part of Tesla's work that I refer to. The other part is his earthquake machine. And this machine, in order to function, needs a good rap on occasion. It needs to have a vibration driven into it. Also, vibration needs to be driven into the earth. If what we call now the Freund effect becomes active. So let me explain the Freund effect. This is probably, Billy, the most exciting new physics, and it's totally legitimate. It's been demonstrated. There are numerous scientific papers out there that you can read about it. It has been replicated by an independent lab in Japan, and it was developed by Dr. Friedemann Freund, who was a NASA physicist, and he described the new physics of kind of along the same lines of a semiconductor, but where you have these peroxide defects in the minerals in igneous rock deep in the earth. So it's like these little defects, but when that rock is put under pressure, and the movement of the rock really doesn't need to be that much, only a few angstroms, and those then the positive electronic charge carriers will rush to the surface.
Wow.
And so what you have is basically, in Freund's word, when put under stress, igneous rock turns into a battery. So we're sitting on top of a battery, right? And so when you're looking at the difference in power generation, where you look at, what is the ROI of building a coal power plant? What are the running costs? What are the maintenance costs? What, the fuel costs, all of that, transportation, everything. And it's mind-boggling to think what the real cost of those are.
Yeah. Right.
But as an aside, though, I will tell you this was an interesting little snippet you might like.
Yeah.
That there was enough coal mined in the United States in 2021 for fuel for power plants to build 76 Great Pyramids.
Wow.
So I know. It blew my mind when I did the math on that. It was like a pyramid 76 times the size of the Great Pyramid. And every year, that's the thing. I mean, it's like we've been, these methods for power generation have been, been in use for over 100 years.
Right.
And, and I make the point, while we have these devices here, you know, and the quantum leaps in technological advances in the development of these, you know, where you go through the semiconductors, transistors, all of the miniaturization, you know, these have far outstripped in progress the means that we use to actually generate the electrons that they use, that is needed in them. So, I mean, it's not. I'm not. Somebody asked me, "Well, what have you got against coal?" And I was like, "I don't have anything against coal. I love coal. You know, it's kept me warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Fully employed, and so I don't have anything against coal, and I don't have anything against people making a profit off their investment. But I do think that in order to maximize your return, you should constantly look for more efficient, less expensive ways to do things. And I think that knowing the Freund effect, knowing that we're sitting on a battery and we're not even tapping into it, it's like I think when I look into the future and you look at, funny thing happened when I was finishing up my book. It was almost like I was in this time warp where the past rushed forward and the future came back, and I'm in the middle of it, and I'm looking in the past and I'm looking into the future, and it just gave me a sense of great hope for the future, where a lot of people feel a lot of despair for the future because of just like a limited vision of what's going on right now. But I have great hope for the future. If you look at the way society has changed over the years, since the development of, the first computer, for instance, Charles Babbage is claimed to be the inventor of the first computer. His computer was huge, it was a big iron monstrosity, it had shafts, rods.
It was megalithic.
Megalithic. Lots of parts, lots of thousands of moving parts. And you won't be able to lift it on your own. And so the output of that machine that he built is contained in a very, very small fraction of the power of your cell phone that you carry around with you every day. Technology, invention, science marches on.
Everything keeps moving, man.
You got to stay moving with it.
Absolutely.
That was my motivation for writing the Tesla connection, was to incorporate all the different explorations over the past, the new discoveries, and then specifically and more importantly, to highlight Friedemann Freund's discovery.
One of the things that kind of caught my attention in there was the Cadman's pulse generator. And that's like, wow. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yes.
There was I think it was in the 60s, a man named Edward Kunkel. He did some research. He thought that the Great Pyramid's interior would have worked as a hydraulic ram pump. And so he built one out of tubing, and I guess it worked, I don't know. But he wrote a book called The Pharaoh's Pump. Then John Cadman came along, and he tried to replicate Kunkel's experiment, and it didn't quite work. He focused on just the lower parts of the pyramid, the subterranean chamber. He spent, I don't know how many sleepless nights just whittling out a subterranean chamber out of plaster in his house. I think he's, taking over the kitchen table and whittling anything in a guy's life. may not always work with the wife. But anyway, he lives in Bellingham, Washington. And I got to hear from him. He communicated with me, and he was sending me his stuff. And then ultimately I said, well, you know, of all the people who I hear from and talk to, everybody seems to have an idea of how something should work, but this is the only man who'd actually done anything about the idea and built something.
Right.
And it would behoove me to go visit him and witness his pump on site. So I went out to Bellingham, and he had invited a hydraulic engineer to be there at the same time. And so we were out on his property, and he fired up his hydraulic pulse generator. It had a model of the subchamber. He had a pipe coming into it, and then a pipe going down to a wastegate. And he just opened up some valves, made sure that the water was running. There was no air in the system, and closed the valves and allowed the thing to run. And the thing that surprised me was that just walking up and down the path, which was on an angle. And underneath the path, he had a tube representing a shaft or passageway where the water would go in the Great Pyramid. And walking down the path was shaking with vibration. And it was, I timed it, it was 60 beats per minute, and it beat like a heart, which was very impressive. And so I was really impressed with his work. I admired it a great deal. I still do. The unfortunate thing with that model, where the hydraulic pulse generator is contained just inside the Great Pyramid, the evidence in the Great Pyramid does not seem to support it as it is now described, or as it has been demonstrated, because there are no exits from the subchamber anywhere. And you know, if you go down the south passageway, which is opposite the entrance, you go down to the end there. There is no opening in that area at all.
Right.
And Howard Weiss, when he did his exploration, he actually cleared out the well shaft in the center of the subchamber and chiseled out more limestone to see if there was something else that he could find. Then there was no exit through the center shaft going down.
Wow.
So that seems to work against John Cadman in terms of the pyramid being the source of the vibrations. However, I do think that hydraulics played a big part on the entire site. If you take yourself away from the Great Pyramid and you look at it from a larger system viewpoint, you've got at least 9 pyramids on the Giza Plateau. And if they were all built to perform the same function, then they would all need to be served by a central, really high-powered pulse generator that would actually shake the entire plateau, not just one pyramid. And so, I proposed in my book that, I call it the big daddy of pulse generators that may function exactly the way Cadman proposed it, but we don't know because we haven't found it yet. There have been several design changes in my work after learning what the ancient Egyptians actually did as opposed to what I proposed they may have done.
Right.
And in all cases, they proved themselves to be a hell of a lot smarter than me.
Well, they're smarter than all of us, so don't feel bad. When you look at the Great Pyramid, and you and I have been inside the Great Pyramid and so many times, been down the subterranean shaft, 65 meters, descending down, and then another 30 meters straight down. And, the Queen's Chamber and all these other little areas. And obviously, we definitely see the same thing. We see a machine. I don't see a temple.
Yeah,
I don't see a burial tomb. I see it as a machine. But what I also don't see are some of the things that appear to be missing from the Great Pyramid. Like it seems like some things were taken away. Do you come up with the same hypothesis?
Yeah, particularly in the Grand Gallery, the slots on the ramps going up, the ledges next to the ramp going up. Those slots, I proposed, held these resonator banks. I describe the Great Pyramid as a giant musical instrument because of the acoustics, the way it responds to certain frequencies. And there's more information coming in on that. And there's more research actually being done. Yeah, there's a lot missing. And what form it actually took, I would love to know. But I'd have to go back in time. I need a time machine to go back.
I know. Yeah, we both need one. I was inside the King's Chamber many times, obviously, and you as well. And you have the stone box or the granite box, which I don't think was there from the original, but maybe I could be wrong. But when you look at the corner piece, that corner piece on the left corner, it's blown off or it's missing.
Right.
But if you look straight across the room from where that corner piece is missing from the granite box, it looks like an impact on the wall, the granite wall. Do you
really?
have a hypothesis about that? Yeah, when the next time you go in and you walk in towards that granite box, on the left-hand side, you'll see that big corner that's missing. Then turn right around from that and look in a straight angle towards the wall about maybe 15 feet away or 20 feet away maybe, and you'll see that the wall, the granite wall was impacted and it's the same shape as the piece that's missing from the granite box.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. Now, what kind of force could create that?
I don't know. That's interesting. I'm trying to imagine a piece of granite hitting another piece of granite and gouging out a significant amount of material, and it would be hard to imagine that could happen. But who knows?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, you just got to take a look at it. I mean, this is all hypothesis, speculation.
I think certainly don't. Keep your imagination active, and if you have an idea, express it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's the way. That's the way we advance.
That's how we advance. You're right. We have to throw ideas around. Bouncing, getting a chance to talk to you and bouncing ideas off you is incredible, because there's not that many people that I can really bounce these particular ideas off of. Not that people don't have IQs. It's just that people are specializing in different things, and in this particular area, you're one of the world leaders. Now I've been to the 𝗪𝗡𝗦 quite a few times. When I walk in that place, again, I don't get the tomb feeling or burial feeling. I get more of a machine feeling. And I went in there with a Geiger counter, and I realized that those gigantic megalithic diorite and crystal granite stone boxes are still giving off higher than background radiation.
Well, I first went in the 𝗪𝗡𝗦 in 1995. It was closed to the public. It was, just dark, dusty, and no people there. I was doing a documentary with Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval with Netherlands Television. And one thing that I noted immediately was that these boxes seemed to be extraordinarily well crafted. And I had with me a toolmaker square and a straight edge, and I jumped down into one of these crypts and laid the steel against the granite, so to speak. And it was just like I was laying it on a precision surface plate in a manufacturing plant.
Wow.
So that impressed me a great deal. When you're faced with just a raw block, right? And you, as a manufacturer, and you want to design a process on how to make it, and you look at what tools, machines are available to you, and then lacking any tool or machine that's capable of doing what you want to do, you design and build a different kind of machine to do the work. or several different kinds of machines to do the work. That's just the way it has to go. With the 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗬𝗧, I try to get a quote from several granite surface plate manufacturers on actually creating one of those granite boxes. 13 feet long, 7.5 feet wide, about 8 feet high, and the interior hollowed out and cut with precision. Only one got back with me and said, I appreciate, this is a fascinating question. I have fascinating objects. I'd like to say that we could do it, but we don't have the equipment to do it. If we wanted to create a box, we would cut 5 pieces and ship them to the site and bolt them together, and that's pretty much the way we would approach that. So they didn't have the machine to do it, and and the problem is that a lot of people will say, oh well, it can't be done today. That is a misconception, in my opinion, because that certainly could be done today if there was enough money thrown at it. To say the government wanted one of those boxes made, yeah, it could be done. Right. You would be building some highly specialized equipment to do it, but certainly it could be done. There's nothing that cannot be done in terms of that.
Right. Incredible. Just a matter of resources. I mean, they spend $100 billion a year on the military. If they redirected 50 billion, of that into making a stone box, like you say, I'm pretty sure they'd figure it out.
I don't think it would cost 50 billion unless they were going to launch it into space.
Well, the government, they'll buy a hammer for $100,000. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, an Allen wrench
They've been known to do make the craziest purchases. But it's just, just another example, in my opinion, that a lot of things around the Giza Plateau and Saqqara are not as they seem, or not as we've been taught, that in some way these things serve a technological purpose. And that's what I get from going there. And I keep going back like you as well. And I just keep seeing more and more evidence of a technological advanced civilization that may have incorporated a level of spirituality within their technology. Overall, it seems like a lot of the dynastic Egyptians inherited something that was already there. What are your views on that?
I think that the Egyptians are open to considering that now. Billy, I'm happy to tell you that the Egyptians are more in tune with my work than they are in the West. So, there are people like Muhammad, Ibrahim, and Yusuf Awiyan. There's Ahmad Anwar, a few others who support my work. So
nice.
It's the tide is turning, and young people, they're the future, and they're the hope for actually seeing, the tomb theory buried.
We need to bury the tomb theory.
Bury the tomb theory.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.